PTA Karen walked into Judge Judy's courtroom with a clipboard, a condescending smile, and what she thought was the ultimate trump card. Within minutes, she would make a statement so arrogant, so breathtakingly foolish, that it would trigger one of the most devastating takedowns in courtroom television history. What this woman didn't know was that she was about to insult the education of someone who would respond by putting 7 law degrees on the screen behind her. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind to the moment this disaster began. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The courtroom was packed that day, the audience settling into their seats with the usual mix of curiosity and anticipation that comes with a Judge Judy taping. The bailiff stood at attention. The cameras were rolling, and then she walked in. Let's call her Karen because that's exactly what she was. Mid-40s, perfectly styled hair, designer handbag clutched under one arm and a thick binder of documents under the other. She had that look, you know the one. The expression of someone who's used to being the smartest person in every PTA meeting, every parent-teacher conference, every neighborhood HOA gathering. She walked with the confidence of a woman who'd never been truly challenged, never been put in her place, never faced someone who could see right through her inflated sense of authority. Judge Judy sat at her bench, glasses perched on her nose, eyes already scanning the case file in front of her. At 70-something years old, she'd seen thousands of people walk through her courtroom. The liars, the scammers, the entitled, the delusional. She could read people in seconds, spot a fraud from across the room, and dismantle a weak argument before the person even finished making it. But Karen, clipboard in hand, had no idea what she was walking into. She thought this was going to be easy. She thought her title as PTA president, her master's degree in education, and her 5 years of experience managing school fundraisers made her untouchable. She thought she could talk her way through this the same way she'd talked her way through countless disputes with teachers, parents, and administrators. The case itself seemed simple enough. A contract dispute over a school fundraiser gone wrong. Money was owed, receipts were missing, accusations were flying. Karen was the plaintiff, convinced she was in the right, convinced that her meticulous notes and her authoritative demeanor would win the day. She had no idea that within the next 10 minutes she would say something so insulting, so spectacularly misguided, that Judge Judy would do something she rarely does. She would stop the proceedings, look directly into the camera, and systematically destroy every ounce of credibility this woman thought she had. And it would all start with 7 degrees appearing on the screen behind her, each one a monument to Karen's colossal mistake. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on Karen with that penetrating stare that had made countless litigants squirm over the years. "So, Ms. Patterson," she began, using Karen's real last name with a tone that was neutral but somehow already skeptical, "you're here because you claim the defendant owes you $3,500 for a school fundraiser that didn't go as planned. Is that correct?" Karen nodded eagerly, flipping open her binder with a flourish that suggested she'd rehearsed this moment. "Yes, Your Honor, and I have all the documentation right here. Emails, spreadsheets, budget projections. I've organized everything by date and category, color-coded for easy reference." Judge Judy's eyebrow arched slightly, a micro-expression that regular viewers would recognize as the first sign of impending doom. "I didn't ask if you color-coded anything. I asked if you're claiming $3,500. Karen's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Yes, but I think it's important you understand the full context of how we run these fundraisers. You see, in modern educational environments, we follow very specific protocols." There it was, the first mistake. The subtle implication that Judge Judy needed Karen to explain how things worked in the real world. Judge Judy set down her pen with a soft click that somehow felt louder than it should have. "Ms. Patterson, I'm going to stop you right there. I don't need a seminar on PTA protocols. What I need is for you to answer my questions directly. Did you have a written contract with the defendant?" Karen shifted in her seat, her confidence still intact but showing the first hairline cracks. "Well, Your Honor, we had an understanding. In the parent community, we operate on good faith and verbal agreements because we're all working toward the same goal for the children." The courtroom audience exchanged glances. Anyone who'd watched Judge Judy for more than 5 minutes knew that verbal agreement and understanding were phrases that made her absolutely furious. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice dropping to that dangerously calm register that preceded every major explosion. "So what you're telling me is you handed over $3,500 based on nothing more than a conversation and a handshake?" Karen's face flushed slightly. "Your Honor, with all due respect, it's not quite that simple. In educational settings, we have to trust each other, Maybe if you understood how modern parent-teacher organizations operate. The courtroom went still. The bailiff's eyes widened. The defendant's lawyer looked up sharply from his notes. Karen had just made the fatal error of suggesting that Judge Judy didn't understand something, that her knowledge was somehow lacking, that maybe she needed to be educated by a PTA president with a binder and an attitude. Judge Judy's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. A spark, a warning, the kind of look a predator gives right before it strikes. "Excuse me?" she said quietly. "What was that?" Karen, somehow completely oblivious to the danger she was in, actually doubled down. She leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on that patronizing tone that every teacher, every store manager, every customer service representative has heard from a woman who thinks her title gives her ultimate authority. "Your Honor, I just mean that the landscape of educational fundraising has evolved significantly. We use digital platforms now, crowdfunding strategies, social media engagement. These are concepts that, well, they didn't exist when you were practicing law." The courtroom gasped, audibly. The defendant dropped his pen. A woman in the third row covered her mouth. The bailiff actually turned his head to look at Karen with an expression of complete disbelief, as if he couldn't quite process what he'd just heard. Karen had just told Judge Judy in open court on camera that her legal knowledge was outdated, that she was too old, too out of touch, too removed from the modern world to understand what was happening. Judge Judy sat perfectly still. Not a muscle moved. Her hands remained folded on the bench. Her face was a mask of deadly calm, the kind of stillness that comes right before a Category 5 hurricane makes landfall. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet that people in the gallery had to lean forward to hear. "You think my education is outdated?" Karen incredibly, stupendously, catastrophically kept talking. "I'm not saying outdated exactly, Your Honor. I'm just saying that I have a master's degree in education from a very prestigious university. I've completed certification courses in contract management, nonprofit fundraising, and organizational leadership. I've been PTA president for 5 consecutive years. I think my credentials speak for themselves when it comes to understanding these kinds of agreements." There it was, the moment that would be clipped, shared, memed, and replayed millions of times across social media. Karen had just compared her online certificates and her PTA presidency to Judge Judy's legal career. She had walked into a courtroom and told one of the most famous judges in American television history that her education was just as valid, just as relevant, just as impressive. The defendant's mouth hung open. His lawyer was scribbling notes frantically, probably realizing that his job had just become infinitely easier. The audience was frozen in that delicious moment of anticipation, when you know something spectacular is about to happen, but you can't quite believe you're witnessing it in real time. Judge Judy slowly removed her glasses. She set them down on the bench with careful precision. She looked directly at Karen with an expression that could have cut through steel. Then she turned slightly toward the production booth and said 4 words that would change everything. "Bring up my credentials." Karen blinked, confused. The audience held its breath. And then, on the massive screen behind Judge Judy's bench, something began to appear. Something that would make Karen wish she had never walked into this courtroom, never opened her mouth, never thought for even a second that she could match wits with Judge Judy Scheindlin. The screen flickered to life, and the first credential appeared in crisp, undeniable detail. Bachelor of Arts, American University Government, 1963. Judge Judy didn't look at the screen. She kept her eyes locked on Karen, watching as the color began to drain from the PTA president's face. "That's my undergraduate degree," Judge Judy said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Earned over 60 years ago when women weren't exactly welcomed into law school with open arms. But I didn't stop there." The second credential materialized on screen. "Juris Doctor, New York Law School, 1965. "That's my law degree," Judge Judy continued, still not breaking eye contact with Karen. "I passed the bar exam on my first attempt. Been a practicing attorney ever since. But you have online certificates in contract management, so I suppose we're even, right?" The sarcasm was so sharp it could have drawn blood. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her binder suddenly felt very heavy in her lap. The third credential appeared. "Honorary Doctor of Laws, Elizabethtown College, 1996. "That's my first honorary doctorate," Judge Judy said, leaning forward slightly. "Given to me for contributions to the American legal system. They don't hand these out to people who take online courses, Ms. Patterson." A nervous laugh rippled through the courtroom. Karen's face was now approaching a shade of red that matched the color coding in her precious binder. Fourth credential. "Honorary Doctor of Humane Letters, Pace University, 1998. Judge Judy gestured toward the screen without looking away from Karen. "Another one. This time for my work as a family court judge in New York. I presided over cases for 25 years before this show. 25 years of actual courtroom experience. How many years did you say you've been PTA president? 5th credential. Honorary Doctorate of Laws, New York Law School, 2003. The audience was beginning to murmur now, not with confusion but with anticipation. They could see where this was going and they were absolutely here for it. Karen had shrunk in her chair, her clipboard now held against her chest like a shield that wasn't working. 6th credential. Honorary Doctorate of Law, KUNY School of Law, 2011. Still counting? Judge Judy asked, her voice dripping with pointed courtesy. We're not done yet. Karen looked like she wanted to dissolve into the floor. The defendant was smiling now, not even trying to hide it. His lawyer had stopped taking notes and was simply enjoying the show. And then the 7th credential appeared. Honorary Doctor of Humane Letters, Seton Hall University, 2012. Judge Judy finally glanced at the screen, then back at Karen. 7, she said simply. 7 degrees, multiple best-selling books, 20,000 cases presided over as a family court judge, 45 years in the legal profession. But please, tell me more about your master's degree in education and how my credentials are outdated. The courtroom erupted. The applause from the gallery was quickly silenced by Judge Judy's raised hand. But the damage to Karen's ego was already catastrophic and irreversible. Karen sat frozen, her face a mixture of humiliation and disbelief, clutching her color-coded binder like it might somehow save her from what was coming next. Judge Judy settled back into her chair, her 7 degrees still displayed prominently on the screen behind her, a constant reminder of Karen's spectacular miscalculation. Now that we've established whose education is more relevant in a courtroom, Judge Judy said, her voice returning to that business-like tone that signaled she was about to dismantle someone's entire case piece by piece. Let's talk about what you clearly don't understand about contract law. Karen tried to interject. Your Honor, if I could just explain the circumstances. Judge Judy cut her off with a single raised finger. You've done enough explaining. Now it's my turn. She pulled the case file closer, flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. You claim the defendant owes you $3,500 for a fundraiser that didn't meet your expectations. You've admitted under oath that you had no written contract, no signed agreement, nothing but what you called a verbal understanding. Is that correct? Karen nodded weakly. Yes, but in our community Judge Judy's voice sharpened. Ms. Patterson, in a court of law, verbal agreements are worth the paper they're not written on, especially when money changes hands. Did your prestigious master's degree and your 5 years of PTA experience teach you about the statute of frauds? Karen blinked. The what? Judge Judy leaned forward, and the courtroom could practically feel the temperature drop. The statute of frauds. It's a legal principle that's been around since 1677. That's 348 years of established law. It requires certain types of contracts to be in writing to be enforceable. Now, in most states, contracts involving services over $500 fall under this statute. You handed over $3,500 with no written agreement, no terms, no conditions, nothing. That's not a contract, Ms. Patterson, that's a donation. The defendant's lawyer was grinning now, his case practically winning itself. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But she promised, she started. Judge Judy's voice came down like a gavel. Promises mean nothing without consideration, without meeting of the minds, without mutual assent documented in writing. These are first-year law school concepts, Ms. Patterson. Basic contract law, the kind of thing my outdated education covered pretty thoroughly. Karen tried a different approach, her voice desperate now. Your Honor, the PTA handbook clearly states that all fundraising agreements should be honored in good faith. Judge Judy actually laughed, a short, sharp sound that somehow conveyed both amusement and contempt. The PTA handbook? You think the PTA handbook supersedes 3 centuries of contract law? Do you think your little binder full of color-coded guidelines carries more weight than the Uniform Commercial Code? The courtroom was silent except for a few barely suppressed chuckles from the gallery. Judge Judy wasn't finished. She flipped to another page in the case file. Let's talk about your claim of damages. You say the fundraiser didn't meet its goal, and therefore the defendant should reimburse you. But you've provided no evidence that the defendant breached any duty. You've shown no proof of negligence, no demonstration of fraud, no indication of misrepresentation. What you've shown me is that you made a bad business decision based on nothing but your own assumptions, and now you want this court to bail you out. Karen's voice was barely a whisper now. I trusted her. Judge Judy leaned back, her expression a mixture of disappointment and satisfaction. And that was your mistake. Trust is lovely, Ms. Patterson. But in matters of money and matters of business, trust needs to be backed up by documentation. That's not an outdated concept. That's common sense. The kind of common sense that apparently wasn't included in your online certification courses. The 7 degrees still glowed on the screen behind her. a silent testament to everything Karen had foolishly challenged. And Judge Judy wasn't done yet. Judge Judy straightened the papers in front of her with methodical precision, the kind of deliberate movement that signaled a decision had been made, and nothing Karen could say would change it. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the cameras, the soft breathing of the audience, the rustle of Karen's papers as her hands trembled slightly. "Ms. Patterson," Judge Judy began, her voice carrying the finality of a closing argument, "you came into my courtroom today with your clipboard, your binder, and your inflated sense of authority. You thought that your title as PTA president and your master's degree gave you the right to lecture me about how the modern world works, about how education has evolved, about how my legal credentials are somehow less relevant than your online certificates." Karen tried one last, desperate attempt. "Your Honor, please, I didn't mean any disrespect." Judge Judy's hand came down on the bench, not quite a slam, but forceful enough to stop Karen mid-sentence. "You meant every word of it. You walked in here thinking you were the smartest person in the room, and you learned a very expensive lesson today. Let me make this crystal clear, so even your prestigious education can understand it. You have no case. You had no contract. You have no legal standing whatsoever." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Karen's face crumbled, her eyes beginning to water, but Judge Judy showed no mercy. Judgment for the defendant. "Case dismissed. You get nothing. Not $3,500. Not 35 cents, nothing." The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the courtroom like thunder. The audience erupted in applause, not polite golf claps, but genuine, enthusiastic approval. The defendant threw his arms up in victory, his lawyer shaking his hand vigorously. Karen sat motionless, stunned into complete silence. But Judge Judy wasn't quite finished. As Karen began to gather her binder with shaking hands, Judge Judy leaned forward one more time. "And Ms. Patterson, let me give you one final piece of education that your master's degree apparently didn't cover. When you walk into someone else's domain, especially a courtroom, especially my courtroom, you show respect. You don't assume you know more. You don't condescend. You don't insult, because you never know who you're dealing with. Today you learned that lesson the hard way." She gestured to the screen behind her where all 7 degrees still blazed in their glory. "Next time you want to compare credentials with someone, maybe do your homework first. Before we see what happened after this courtroom devastation went viral, if you loved watching this reality check unfold, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me your favorite Judge Judy moment. Trust me, the aftermath of this case will blow your mind. Now let's see how the internet reacted." Karen stood on trembling legs, her face the color of a tomato, and walked toward the courtroom exit. It was the longest walk of her life, and everyone was watching. The moment Karen stepped out of that courtroom, her humiliation was just beginning. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Every corner of the internet had discovered the woman who dared to insult Judge Judy's education and paid the ultimate price. The video titles were merciless. PTA Karen gets destroyed by 7 law degrees. Judge Judy ends Karen's entire career in 10 minutes. Woman insults judge's education, instantly regrets it. The view counts climbed into the millions, then tens of millions. Comments flooded in from every direction, and they were not kind. Imagine telling Judge Judy her education is outdated. One comment read with over 200,000 likes. "This woman really thought her PTA presidency was equivalent to 7 degrees and 45 years of law," another user wrote. "The audacity is absolutely breathtaking." Memes spawned instantly. Side-by-side images of Karen's confident entrance versus her destroyed exit. Screenshots of all 7 degrees with captions like, "When you bring a binder to a PhD fight." GIFs of Judge Judy's facial expressions became viral currency, shared millions of times across every platform. But the real-world consequences for Karen were even more severe. Within a week, she had quietly resigned from her position as PTA president. The parents at her school had seen the clip. The teachers had seen it. The principal had seen it. Suddenly, the woman who had ruled every meeting with an iron fist and in condescending tone was a laughingstock. Her authority, built on years of intimidation and manufactured superiority, had evaporated in a single courtroom appearance. People who had been afraid to challenge her before were now openly mocking her. The binder that she had carried so proudly became a symbol of her colossal arrogance and catastrophic failure. Local news outlets picked up the story. "Area PTA president becomes viral sensation after Judge Judy appearance," read one headline. The article detailed her failed lawsuit, her insulting comments, and her complete destruction at the hands of a television judge with 7 degrees and 0 patience for nonsense. Karen deleted her social media accounts. She stopped attending school functions. She became a ghost in her own community. A cautionary tale whispered about at coffee shops and parent meetups. "Remember that woman who tried to out-educate Judge Judy?" became a phrase that would follow her for years. Judge Judy, meanwhile, addressed the incident briefly in a later interview. "I've been doing this for decades," she said with that characteristic smirk. "People walk into my courtroom every single day thinking they're smarter than me, thinking their little bit of authority in their little corner of the world means something. They all learn the same lesson. Credentials matter, experience matters, and respect matters most of all." The interviewer asked if she felt bad about embarrassing Karen so publicly. Judge Judy's response was immediate. She embarrassed herself. I just gave her the platform to do it on. The lesson from this courtroom disaster is simple but powerful. Arrogance without substance is just noise. Confidence without competence is just illusion. And when you challenge someone's credentials, especially in their own domain, you better make absolutely sure you know who you're dealing with. Karen learned this lesson in the most public, most humiliating way possible. She walked into that courtroom thinking her master's degree and her PTA experience made her untouchable. She walked out knowing that 7 law degrees, 45 years of legal experience, and 20,000 cases beats a binder full of color-coded notes every single time. So here's my challenge to you. Before you leave, do 3 things. First, smash that like button if you enjoyed watching instant karma delivered by a judicial legend. Second, subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of people who got exactly what they deserved. And third, drop a comment below telling me what Judge Judy moment is your all-time favorite. Was it this 7-degree destruction? Was it another case where she absolutely demolished someone's arrogance? I want to hear from you. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that respect and humility go a lot further than a clipboard and an attitude. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the courtroom of life, bring credentials, not just confidence. I'll see you in the next video where karma continues to serve justice one viral moment at a time.